Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Harry, and you are in my channel called Harry Bit. Anyway, welcome, wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, so welcome to my channel. Today we are going to react on this newly released God Bless Bitcoin documentary created by the Bitcoin community. So as you know, I am very passionate about Bitcoin, and I will do my part to advance the global adoption as a global currency and as a store of value, a digital asset. Okay, so um, we are. I'm going to divide this into 30-minute reaction video, as long as it takes. So it's probably 5-10 part series, because I think that 30 minutes is enough for everyone to sort of digest everything, because there's a lot of concepts here that we really need to dig deep into. So I'm just gonna comment. There's a lot of experts in this documentary. They are going to talk to you about so many concepts, but I would like to probably simplify it and maybe make it more digestible by everyone. All right, so let's start the ball rolling. The Bitcoin community created this film to spread hope. Nice, di ba? Parang Matrix, huh? It's like Matrix. The movie. I love the music. Wow, so they throw in a lot of concepts in there. So I think the first part will help us realize that there is something wrong in the world. There is something wrong in the global financial system. The global financial system is broken. So that's, I think, what they are trying to tell us. First part of this movie.
Remember the Brady Bunch? Back before our money was broken, you could have one parent working while supporting a family with 6 kids and a live-in maid. Oh yeah, and a dog, Tiger. What happened?
I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into
What
gold.
what happened? I used to hear my mother tell me the price of bread in the 50s, in the 60s, and they were like, I grew up in the Philippines, and so it's like they're like 50, 20s, 10 cents, something like that. It was really like cheap. what can 10-cent peso buy today? That is a question. So it has it's not it's, I don't think the term is inflation. It's more like the peso has devalued so much in the span of so many years. Okay, and so yeah, so and it started with this guy, President Nixon.
or other reserve assets.
So President Nixon in 71, August 15th, 1971, took the dollar off the gold standard so we could print more money, so we could steal your wealth.
And the reason that he decoupled gold from currency was to pay for the Vietnam War.
The dollar will dramatically lose its purchasing power. The more they print, the more it gets diluted. And with Bitcoin, you just can't do that. And so people who
Okay, so there's the clip showed us the President Nixon in the United States declaring that the dollar is going to be no longer be pegged to gold, because from the after the Second World War, the superpowers, the winners of the war, mostly Western countries, decided to sort of make the United States dollar as the reserve currency of the world. And that was as long as it was pegged to gold. Okay, so from 1946 45 onwards, so other nations would send gold to the United States, and I think some of them were complaining, and because it's hard to transport gold, which is I'm gonna explain. They will explain it to us later also. And so and that's just one of the reasons, and the other reason is of course to finance the Vietnam War and all of those issues that the United States was facing. Anyway, so President Nixon decided in 1971 to depeg the US dollar to the gold. So now any country, central banks can just sort of print their own money arbitrarily. That's why we call all these currencies the United States dollar, European euro, pound, peso, yuan, all of these currencies. We call them fiat currency because they are printed or created arbitrarily by our governments. There is no, like, it's not because there is gold reserve, so the governments just decide to create it on their whim. We will see that one.
understand,
Explain.
the concept of money supply being the driver of inflation, then they'll understand why Bitcoin is superior.
So a single politician with the ability to print money can turn employees against employers, can turn the customers against the vendors. They can turn every industry against every other industry. They have people rioting in the streets. And typically, the people don't realize that it's the government that's created the distress, and they blame the shopkeeper or the policeman or the person in the streets for causing their problems. And so you have unnecessary violence, you have human tragedy, businesses collapse, families collapse, people lose their lives. And it's all because the economy is, in essence, collapsing because the energy is being drained out of the currency.
There has been so much damage caused by broken money over the last 50 years, and more people are feeling left behind.
If you work for a living, you're paid a salary, you're kind of a slave. Well, that's a harsh word. It makes us uncomfortable. But it's true in the sense that you're given a certain amount of money for your time and effort. Therefore, you don't have time for creativity and innovation because you're just doing your job, just punching your ticket. Well, part of that is because your money that you're paid gets less valuable every day. We've been sold a bill of goods that inflation is good for us. That's nonsense. Why should the devaluation of my hard-earned money be good for me? That doesn't make any sense at all. Who it's good for is the people at the tippy top.
How in the world are they going to get ahead if they're...
Yeah. So that was also my dilemma when I was working. I've been working as a nurse, a registered nurse in the Philippines, and then I moved to New Zealand, Australia, been there for 20 years as a slave, quote unquote, wiping bums. So it also came to mind, like I was actually restless and sort of like looking for some answers to my questions, like why am I working so hard but it feels like it's never enough, okay? And so that this concept of inflation, when the value of money is it's devalued every year because of an inflation, like 2, 3, 5%, okay, depends where you are. So that means if you're earning 100,000 a year, the actual purchasing power of that is only 95,000 if your inflation rate in your country is 5%. So you keep on working, you're spending a lot of energy, and somehow the value of your money, 5%, is stolen from you, okay? And also taxation. It's hard to talk about taxation, but yeah. So in New Zealand, for example, the more time you spend working, if you do overtime, like after 8 hours, you are paid more, but you're also taxed more. So the normal taxation rate is around between 17 to 23-25%. But if you do overtime, you'll be taxed up to 45%. So you'll only get 55% of your hard work, okay? Which is kind of unfair, okay? Anyway, so when I was working as an employee, all these things also came to mind. Like, I'm probably a rebel by nature, revolutionary. Because I was like, it's unfair. Like, there's something wrong. Like, I was just restless. Anyway, let's continue.
Operating on this system that doesn't preserve their energy and their work and their time.
So it seems like we're all getting rug pulled. I have a sneaky feeling it's inflation that's taking advantage of us. But what exactly is inflation?
Taxation without legislation.
There are two kinds of inflation. There's inflation due to unfortunate acts of God, force majeure. So if the monetary system is being run perfectly, and if there's a tornado or a hurricane, and there's a temporary shortage of goods and services, then prices will go up. And so that is physical inflation. But there's another form of inflation, which is monetary inflation, and this is much more common. And this is generally the source of 98% of inflation in the world, the vast majority of it. And that's when all of the goods and services and assets in a society are priced in a currency that is in and of itself inflationary. So if I price things in the dollar and I double the supply of dollars, the supply of houses doesn't increase, but the supply of dollars does increase. Therefore, the prices will probably double over time.
Typically, especially.
Okay, so Michael Saylor talk about two causes of inflation. One is physical, which is quite obvious. So we just have to understand the basic concepts here of supply and demand. So when there's force majeure or acts of nature like typhoon in the Philippines, is very common here. We're visited by typhoons 10 times a year in on average. Okay, so it sort of destabilize the balance between supply and demand of goods and services. So when there are calamities, of course, goods and services would be less, and there will be more demand for them. And what happens to the price is that it will go up. Okay, so that's one cause of inflation. So the prices of goods and services go up. Okay, and the other one, he spoke about the supply of money. So when our governments are arbitrarily printing a lot of money, that gives a lot of purchasing power to the people. So they have more money to buy stuff and demand for services. So there are more demand for goods and services, and so naturally, because there are more demand, the prices would also go up, even if you have a constant supply of goods or services. But because there is more demand, because people have money, then that will increase the prices of goods and services. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why we have inflation, and this has been normalized by our governments, which is it shouldn't be. like they tell us that 2% inflation is normal. It's like stealing 2% of our assets every year. The government is stealing from us 2%, and it has been normalized, and it shouldn't be normalized. Okay, so Kathy Wood will explain this a little bit.
If you're going through a hyperinflation,
deeper.
wages do not keep up. They do not keep up. And so inflation eats into purchasing power. You can't buy enough to feed your family.
The average income in this country is now $5,000 less than the average cost of living. Of the cost of basic human needs, food, shelter, and transportation is now $5,000 more than the average person makes, which means if you're in that category, which is most Americans, you now cannot make ends meet.
Here in the United States, they target 2% inflation. They're literally saying we want to steal about 2% of your purchasing power every year. And then we have years like this where the inflation rate is 7 or 8 or 9% higher than normal. That means they're just stealing our purchasing power even that much faster. So there's no honest unit of account for them. It's just a credit-based system. They're just making different numbers on their spreadsheets, and they say, you know what, we're going to create this much more credit this year. We're going to destroy this much more purchasing power. And it's the citizens of the country that pay for that. We're paying for our government to make irresponsible decisions. So yes, I think that's very immoral.
At this point, it's getting very...
Okay, so they're talking about how does the government create money in the first place? How does the government print more money? So sometimes they actually print more money, like literally, but most of the time it's through government bonds. Okay, so we are paying the government. So when you buy a government bonds, let's say you're buying 100,000, you are giving your 100,000 to the governments in exchange for, let's say, 5% interest after 5, 10, 20, 30, depends on your terms. So the government is borrowing money from us, and that's how they make money, and that's what they use to spend all of these government expenses. Now there's also a problem with us with that, because that is very prone to corruption, because those who are near the printing will have more access to that money. Okay, so corruption in the government, and if you're closer to the printing press, printing of money, then you have easy access to money. And that's also the reason why when they say the rich become richer, the poor becomes poorer, because those who have access to money will definitely get more money, and the poor who don't have access to that, then they will remain poor. Okay, so that's how governments create money. Okay, they're borrowing money from us in exchange for interest, and so through treasury bonds, or what they call government bonds. Okay,
difficult for people to catch up. We're seeing more people working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. We see more dual income households. There's less households where you just have one person that works and one person that stays home and runs the household and the family. Now everybody's working.
So let me get this straight. We take our God-given talents and work really hard, and our money buys us less and less every year? I don't like the sound of that. So how does government create money?
We print it digitally, so we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally. We also print actual currency, and we distribute that through the Federal Reserve banks.
Oh, see, so this is an acknowledgement by Chairman Powell. He's the chairman of the Federal Reserve of the United States. So we print money. That's what he said. Okay. Arbitrarily. Okay, it's funny. Gains to the issuers of money.
The current financial system was built for the elite. It was built to ensure that those that control institutions and have a vast amount of money can make even more profit at the expense of regular citizens that are from the working class. The current financial system was designed to promote the wealth of a minority, which is why that minority tries everything possible to discourage people from using Bitcoin, because they know they will end up losing that privilege they have been carrying for centuries.
Yes.
So we can't trust money.
So we know Elizabeth Warren is forming this anti-crypto army, and so many other groups who doesn't like Bitcoin because it destabilizes them, like it takes away their privileges, their printing press privileges. They're closer to the printing of money, so they. We will also talk about that when it comes to the banking system.
So we can't trust money to tell us accurately how much value we create. So it's not hard to see how we go from this to a world where a lot of people just don't even know how much they are worth to the world. And that makes it easier for the bullies of the world to step in and say, you know what? We'll tell you how much you're worth.
A person who gives themselves to honest labor and gives an honest day's work deserves a wage that will allow them to sustain their lifestyle at a basic standard. And if that's not happening, then we have a problem in terms of the way our economic structure works. And there are a lot of people who work multiple jobs in order to meet that standard. And that is probably an indication that we have a problem. It's not good stewardship to put myself in a position where I acquire so much debt that I can't sustain my living. And we have people who are doing that all the time, and we have people who in some ways promote the idea that you can live this way.
The incentives exist.
Okay, so here we have to talk about how difficult it is to make ends meet nowadays. And even younger people are having difficulty, okay? Because the problem is our currencies are devaluing every year. So even if we keep working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, 4 jobs, it's never gonna be enough. So younger people, I believe, they suffer more, okay? Plus all this how do you call that, education loans, student loans. In the first world countries they have student loans. Lucky you, because in the third world countries our governments don't even provide student loans to us. Anyway, so yeah, it's and it's the younger generation who suffer, and I can see that and I can feel that, and it's very frustrating for a lot of people, and that also affects the how families decide to procreate. Like, how much can I afford? Like, apparently in the first world countries you need around $250,000 to raise a child. That's a lot of money, okay? That's just one child. What if I want 8? So- okay, so so that has to be taken into consideration, that everything, the cost of surviving, the cost of living is going higher and higher and higher. I saw a comment one time. He said that, why is it that on earth it is so hard to survive? I was born like, on earth, but then even to just survive in this world it's tough. Even to just access basic necessities like food, housing, education, it takes a lot out of your energy, okay? So yeah, it's very tough. And then the second concept there is, our economy is based on debt, okay? In Filipino, in Tagalog, it's utang. Okay, so we are used to that system, and we are adopting that as if it is the norm. And I should say it shouldn't be the norm. Our economic system shouldn't be based on debt. Okay, so but at the moment we survive on credit cards, utang, and it's how the governments survive. It's how human beings survive. And for example, the U.S. government has trillions of dollars in debt. So I don't know how they're gonna pay that, by printing more money, and this will create more problems. So it's just a cycle, a never-ending cycle. And for some reason, the cycle needs to be broken. And that is why we have Bitcoin.